What's going on, you guys? Petplatypus here, and it's time for the final installment in the Dragon Ball vs. Yu Yu Hakusho saga. We're going to be comparing the beginning, middle, and endings of both series, as well as villains, and giving wrap-up thoughts, so you guys know the drill, spoiler warning. If you have not seen Yu Yu Hakusho or Dragon Ball, I don't know why you're watching this video, but if you are, there will be major spoilers for both series, so proceed with caution. With that out of the way, let's get started. Starting off with the villains category, I've tried to record this one a couple of times actually, and it usually just doesn't go well because I end up getting really repetitive and just genuinely repeat myself way too much. So I'm going to try to keep it simple and try to keep it short. It's a mixed category for me. I'm glad I made villains its own category because I would have taken way too long with it, first of all, in the other video, or it would have been way too rushed. So glad I forgot about it, but still. And I did forget about it, that is true. I forgot to add the villains section to the character, to the characterization, or whatever that category was, characters. So yeah, now we're doing villains, and I'm very mixed on this category, because on one hand, I really love how Dragon Ball villains are such massive threats. You know, because the Dragon Balls can be used to bring characters back to life, you can have the villains kill off characters. You can have the villains, you know, they can have body counts, and they can be a huge threats in that sense, and they can also be really charismatic and have good personality and good abilities and everything. Really cool designs and stuff like that. But then on the flip side, while Yu Yu Hakusho villains, at least in my opinion, don't have as much personality going on, well, since we sort of, because of the personalities thing, but you know, base Sensui and base Toguro, those two in particular, kind of stoic, not too interesting personality-wise. I know there's more to their characters, and I'm going to get into that in a second, but still, they make up for not having as much personality as Dragon Ball villains by having way better complexity, way better development, I guess you could say. Like, Dragon Ball villains are fantastic, but they don't have a lot in the way of depth. They might have some good characterization here and there, like Frieza, but in terms of actual character depth, in terms of, like, justified motivation or complexity or whatever, there's really not much. I mean, yeah, you could say Frieza, his motivation's identifiable because fucking who does not want to be immortal? Everyone wants to be fucking immortal, so his motivation is identifiable, but beyond that, he's just a really good villain because he's an asshole and condescending and arrogant and has a Shakespearean way of speaking, and he's just so proper and so badass, and I love Frieza. He's one of the best villains I've seen in any shonen. But again, his weaknesses fall in being, I don't want to say generic per se, but his motivations, identifiable but simplistic, not very complex. Yu Yu Hakusho definitely has that strength over Dragon Ball. And while Dragon Ball has way more villains than Yu Yu Hakusho has villains, Dragon Ball, I mean, they don't get really good until Vegeta, let's be real. I mean, they can be fun. Mercenary Tao is a fun villain. Demon King Piccolo is a fun villain. Even the Red Ribbon Army can be fun, but they don't hold a candle to Toguro or Sensui in terms of characterization, development, complexity, motivation, none of that stuff, you know what I mean? So, really, it comes down to like the quote-unquote Z portion villains, and I just don't know if they stack up in those categories, but then I don't think the Yu Yu Hakusho villains stack up when it comes to, like I said, personality, threat level, you know, because when you can kill off characters and bring them back to life, you can have a villain like Frieza just, you know, I'm going to kill Dende, your fucking healer, I'm going to kill Krillin, I'm going to kill Vegeta, who was the most threatening villain besides me up to this point. You know what I mean? Like, Frieza cemented himself, and he plays a massive role in the series. You can't remove Frieza from Dragon Ball. He is the catalyst for the entire story of Goku going to Earth and the planet Planet Vegeta being destroyed, so it's really mixed for me. Like I said, and I don't want to repeat myself anymore, so I'm just going to call this category a tie. My preference definitely leans towards Dragon Ball villains, but I can't deny that some of the Yu Yu Hakusho villains are just better developed villains in that sense. So, and that's one of the most important things about a villain is the motivation and the complexity. So, it's a tie, and we'll be moving on to the final category, and that category is comparing beginnings, middles, and endings of the series. And this ties in pretty heavily to the story structure section, but I can go a little bit more in depth here, so that's why it's its own category. Starting off with the beginnings of both series, I think the fairest comparison would probably be the Emperor Pilaf saga, which is the first 23 chapters of Dragon Ball, to the, I don't even know what you'd call Yusuke as a ghost saga, I don't really know, afterlife story, whatever the fuck. The beginning of Yu Yu Hakusho, the first 19 chapters, because after that's when the plot really gets going and he becomes a spirit detective and stuff like that. So I think that's the best two parts of the series to compare when you're comparing the beginnings of both series, both around the same length as well. One's 19 chapters, the other's 23. And you can probably already tell from the writing structure section of this video that this category is going to go to Dragon Ball. I'm not a fan of how Yu Yu Hakusho starts from an objective standpoint. I think it takes way too long to get the plot going. It does introduce some key characters, but the same can be said for the Dragon Ball beginning saga. You know, you get Roshi and you get Bulma and Yamcha and all the key characters who will come into play later in the series, as well as things like the Dragon Balls and the Pilaf gang end up coming back and other things like that. And then, you know, like I said, Yu Yu Hakusho, you got Koenma introduced, you got Kuwabara introduced, you got Keiko introduced. The spirit world in general was introduced, and Botan and everything, all characters that come into play later. So it's really got to come down to which one really got the plot going, which one doesn't feel like filler, and you know where I'm going with this. It's Dragon Ball, obviously. They collect all the Dragon Balls by the end, and I'm not saying you have to move that quickly, but at least get the plot going. At least make him a spirit detective by chapter 10 or something, but no, you take forever to get it going, and that's like, and I know 19 chapters doesn't sound like much, but Yu Yu Hakusho is only 175 chapters, so yeah, that's kinda, you know, that's a pretty decent chunk, and even if you don't consider that a decent chunk, it's still like half a year of serialization in Shonen Jump Weekly, 19 chapters, so yeah, that's just way too long to get the story rolling. I gotta give that category to Dragon Ball. If you like the Yu Yu Hakusho beginning more, that's fine, that's totally your opinion, cool. I think objectively speaking though, that category has to go to Dragon Ball. So let's move on to endings, because I have a lot to say about the middle part, so let's do endings first. As far as comparing endings go, this is actually a little bit different because Yu Yu Hakusho probably has better writing in terms of plot holes and consistency and things like that. However, it doesn't serve as strongly as a finale as the Buu Saga. Even if it surpasses the Buu Saga in terms of plot consistency, the Buu Saga is genuinely a finale to the Dragon Ball series. You get wrap-up for characters like Krillin, Gohan, Vegeta. You get tons of fantastic fights, which is one of the most important parts of the Dragon Ball series. You get this great climax against Kid Buu. You have Vegeta fully developing his character, admitting that Goku's stronger. You get the Dragon Balls actually playing a role in the final attack, restoring Goku's energy, and so on and so forth. It's just a really good wrap-up to the Dragon Ball series. The Dragon Balls are involved, tons of character wrap-up. It really puts a cap on the series. It doesn't put a tight cap on it. It puts a cap where, okay, I can stop here and be satisfied, this is a good ending, but the adventures can continue, which is a very Toriyama-style ending. Yu Yu Hakusho, on the other hand, I don't know where Togashi was going with this final arc. You go into the Three Kings arc, and Yusuke is not sure where he should be. The demon world, the human world, how powerful he is comes into play. And then all that stuff gets thrown into the category because we gotta move on to introducing Ryzen and his little backstory, which is not that interesting, and he dies really fast, and it's like, okay, what was the point of him really? Like, honestly. And then you get the actual tournament, which is a cool idea. It's a really good idea on paper. Have a big giant tournament across Demon World to decide who's going to be the king and make all the rules, and then in 3 years, you battle again and see who the new king's going to be. Phone, shut up. I don't think you've interrupted any part of this video series until now, but Jesus. Anyways, fucking phone. Where was I? Yeah, tournament. Really cool setup. You get tons of cool characters. Tons of characters come back. Like a lot of Dark Tournament fighters come back. And it starts off really nice. You got some okay fights. You know, you're moving through the preliminaries and everything's going pretty good. And then you get Yusuke versus Yomi and it's going okay. And it's nothing too crazy, but it's good. You're sort of thinking to yourself, yeah, so far this is probably better as a wrap-up than the Buu Saga, the series could probably keep going, but we'll see where this goes. And then you realize there's only like 8 chapters left. And then you realize, oh my god, it's going to completely skip everything. And that's where the problem lies. The Three Kings tournament just ends. It just straight up stops. And you do find out who won. And Yusuke does break down who the winners of each fight were and everything. But who were those characters? He just basically lists names. I didn't recognize any of them. So, yeah, it's just... I don't know, it's anticlimactic, and if it was serving as a prologue to the actual tournament arc, like, okay, let's establish the tournament, Yusuke's clearly not strong enough to beat characters like Yomi yet, but we'll use this tournament as a prologue to a future tournament. That way we establish all the rules and all the battlegrounds and everything, so that when we dive into the next tournament after another 3-year time skip, we can just dive right into the fights without explaining everything. But no, Yu Yu Hakusho just stops there, with incomplete character arcs, not a sense of proper resolution to the tournament, and just kind of going into like these little like Yusuke as a detective for Keiko, fucking finding who was like pranking them in their fucking all-girls dorm and shit. Like, at least that's one that sticks out in my head that I remember. But like, and that was kind of a cool little story, and I like when Kurama talks about how, oh yeah, it turns out that Koenma's dad was actually like brainwashing demons to be evil, so it basically make Demon World look like they're evil so you could build the barrier and justify building it, and all kinds of shady fucking don't trust the government stuff, you know what I mean? But yeah, I just don't think Yu Yu Hakusho's finale, it looked like Yu Yu Hakusho was going to keep going, is what it looked like in my opinion, and Togashi just decided, nah, I'm going to stop phone, you're about to die. Anyways, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's obvious Dragon Ball wins in that category, at least in terms of endings, because it's a way better conclusion to the series, despite its shortcomings. Yu Yu Hakusho just sort of stops, and Dragon Ball actually concludes, and that's really the best way I can say it. So, giving that one to Dragon Ball. Now for middles. There's almost no point in comparing these two, since Dragon Ball pretty much already won best 2 out of 3, but I think it'd be fun to compare what are not only the middle arcs of both series, but also considered to be the best of both series, the Namek Saga and the Dark Tournament. Dark Tournament doesn't start at the very middle of Yu Yu Hakusho, but because it's such a big arc, the middle of Yu Yu Hakusho falls during the Dark Tournament. So, yeah, and Namek is literally like the middle arc of Dragon Ball, so it like starts halfway through the series. And both arcs actually have a very, very similar climax. Might even go as far as to say Yu Yu Hakusho blatantly ripped it off in some areas, because on a base level, the final battle between Yusuke and Toguro is like beat for beat Goku versus Frieza, just not done nearly as well or nearly as climactically. Of course, that's just my opinion. And like I said, Dragon Ball pretty much already won this category. I'm only comparing these two just for the sake of having some fun. So yeah, there's not going to be like a definitive winner, especially since this really is apples to oranges. One is a tournament, team tournament, and the other is like a stealth, tactical Dragon Ball hunt. I mean, if I wanted to compare them, I could say that the Dragon Ball arc has, the Dragon Balls, so it's more plot-focused than a tournament, because, he's like a spirit detective, but then I could also say, well, the Dark Tournament has more characterization and development for its main character, and Genkai and Toguro as a villain, whereas Namek doesn't really have much in the way of character development outside of maybe Vegeta, so yeah, and then there's the fact that Goku's not that involved in the Namek arc until he fights the Ginyu Force, and then he's out of commission again pretty quickly after that, so there are shortcomings for both arcs. I think the Dark Tournament may be a little too simplistic, maybe some of the fights feel a little fillerish, maybe it could have been shorter, but... And no, I'm not talking about the fights against some of the characters that come back later, obviously, the ones that come back for the Three Kings arc, yeah, you need those fights, obviously, but you know what I mean. So yeah, well, there are things to compare. They're too different, in my opinion, to really give like a definitive winner. A lot of it comes down to preference. Do you like tournaments? Do you like how long the arc is? Would you rather have been shorter? A lot of that's personal preference, so I just thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about them both because they are the biggest arcs in both series, which I agree with Namek. I can see why Namek... I mean, Android Saga is sort of picked a lot of times for best part of Dragon Ball as well, but I usually see Namek, and a lot of people saying it could have ended here, and I sort of agree. I like the Buu Saga, and I like the Android Saga. Buu Saga way more than the Android Saga, in my personal opinion, but still, I can see why people would say it could have ended here. It feels big and climactic enough to be the finale of the series, Whereas the Dark Tournament, it feels big and climactic, but Yu Yu Hakusho not really having any main goals like Dragon Balls or anything like that, it really feels like it could stop after Chapter Black, feels like it could stop after the Dark Tournament. Ironically, it stops at the one point it should not have stopped at. The one time Yu Yu Hakusho felt like it shouldn't have stopped is where it stopped. I find that so funny. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. They're both amazing arcs. I prefer the Namek arc because of the characters and the climactic battle and the hunting of the Dragon Balls and the tactical stuff. And Vegeta as a villain, just, you have a bigger threat. Frieza's there all the time, but Vegeta still feels like an intimidating villain, which is very tricky to pull off. When you have a villain that is completely and totally surpassed in power by another villain, that first villain, in this case Vegeta, could feel like Diet Evil or something, you know, like Vegeta Light, like he's not as threatening as he used to be, but he's arguably even more threatening, even more badass in the Namek arc than he was before, and that's no small feat. So yeah, both arcs definitely have their merit. Again, no definitive winner, really just comparing them for fun. And now we're done with this video series. Finally, did not expect it to be 3 parts, did not think I'd have this much to say about Dragon Ball and this much to say about Yu Yu Hakusho. And I definitely have a newfound appreciation for Yu Yu Hakusho after going through the series again and making all these comparisons. I don't think I was too negative on it either. I mean, yeah, I gave Dragon Ball, like, every fucking category, which I guess we can transition into the wrap-up section. Yeah, Dragon Ball is the definitive winner, at least in my opinion, from my objective viewpoint. If you disagree, go ahead and list your reasons why. If you're wondering why there was no, like, plot hole / inconsistency category, it's because I know Dragon Balls and I don't know Yu Yu Hakusho's as well. So it wouldn't really be fair to list all of Dragon Balls and not really have anything to say about Yu Yu Hakusho's. So I just cut the category. But for the record, Yu Yu Hakusho would probably win that category, but without proper knowledge of the plot holes and inconsistencies in both series, it wouldn't be fair, so I just cut the category. This video series probably could have just been called Why Dragon Ball's Better Than Yu Yu Hakusho Part 1, 2, and 3. And what really inspired this video, honestly, was all the negativity I see towards Dragon Ball when compared to Yu Yu Hakusho from a lot of people. Now, if it's your opinion, that's fine, but I'm just stating my opinion and stating why I was inspired to make this video, because everywhere I see, you know, it's just Yu Yu Hakusho is Dragon Ball with story, or Yu Yu Hakusho is so much better than Dragon Ball because Dragon Ball is just all action and it's just kind of a silly, non-serious series or whatever. Or, you know, it takes itself seriously, but it's not high art or anything. And, well, I don't think Dragon Ball is high art. It definitely deserves a lot more merit than people give it. It's a lot more creative than people think. It's got a lot more plot than people think. A lot more character development than people think. And it's not that Yu Yu Hakusho doesn't have any of these things. It's just that when you really compare the two series, you realize Yu Yu Hakusho has its flaws, and it has elements that are not as complex as Dragon Ball in terms of story, characters, and it just, they're similar in a lot of ways. And I think Dragon Ball is definitely better, and I think Dragon Ball is given the short end of the stick when it comes to just people's consensus of the series. I've always said Dragon Ball is one of the most overrated and underrated anime/manga series of all time. And the reason why I say it's both overrated and underrated is because in terms of its story, its characters, its creativity, none of that ever gets talked about. It's all about how, oh yeah, it's an action series. It's all action. It has no plot. It has no story. And that's fucking bullshit. And that's why I consider it to be a very underrated story. But I also consider it to be way too overrated because what makes Dragon Ball popular is not its manga, it's the Z portion of the anime, which is filled to the brim with filler, super slow-paced, has a horrible English dub. You get the idea. That's why I consider Dragon Ball to be both extremely overrated and extremely underrated. It's overrated for the wrong reasons, and it's underrated because no one appreciates the story element. Well, not no one. I'm sure you guys do in my audience, but you know, a lot of people don't appreciate its story elements, its plot twists, its characterization. It's considered by many people to just be an outdated action shonen, and that's just not the case. I could do this comparison with Naruto, and I think Dragon Ball would still come out on top. I could do this comparison with Bleach, and Dragon Ball would still come on top. Fairy Tail, oh, easily Dragon Ball comes out on top. Are you kidding me? Fairy Tail, disgusting. Oh my god. One Piece, no. One Piece would win. But, yeah, I don't really have much else to say, to be honest. That's pretty much what motivated this video, and, That's all I have to say. Dragon Ball wins. I think Dragon Ball is better than Yu Yu Hakusho. If you disagree, tell me in the comments section below. I think I was fair to Yu Yu Hakusho, even though I pretty much knew Dragon Ball was going to win the whole time. I think I was fair. I don't think I was too negative on the series. If I was negative, I tried to be as positive about its positive aspects, I guess you could say. So yeah, still love both series. Dragon Ball, obviously, I love a lot more, but I definitely have more of an appreciation for Yu Yu Hakusho. We'll see if it makes my top 10 pretty soon, because after revisiting the series and everything, I do have more of an appreciation for it. So, with that being said, what did you guys think of this video? What did you guys think of all three videos? Yu Yu Hakusho versus Dragon Ball. Almost didn't want to make this video after I originally announced it, because I was like, yeah, that'd be fun, but oh, that's fanboy fuel. That's like, ooh, that's controversial, because these are very popular series. But I'm glad I did it, even if I put it off for a very long time. So, what are your guys' thoughts? Tell me in the comment section below. You can follow me on Instagram or add me on PSN. I'm petplatypus on both. Give this video a thumbs up and share it on social media. Both those would help me out a ton. Subscribe if you haven't already, or if you like what you've seen here, and click that little bell to get notifications of when my videos go up. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.